that to render your disease inactive, right? So obviously if you have a disease, then you actually need to prevent that disease, and for that we need to design the ligands that we have. Now these ligands that we have, that so we need to find out how to design the ligand. So what's a drug? Can any molecule be claimed as a drug if it can bind to a particular ligand or protein? So this is the part that we're going to discuss about. So what's a drug designing part and all. So first we're going to talk about this basic thing, that what is drug designing. Okay, then I'm going to talk about this lead molecule generation, how to find the lead molecule, and what are the different theories of drug designing. There are two different kind of drug designing parts. So what are the classification and how are they different from one another? And obviously this small molecule. Now today when we talk about this therapy, there are a number of different modes of therapies available. So either you can use some small molecule, or you can use biological macromolecules such as protein, nucleic acid, or PNAs, that means peptide targeted or bonded to a nucleic acid structures. These are all randomly used as drugs. So are those better than the normal small molecules that we use today? And if they are, then why it is better? So what are the different so like that we will talk about a particular segment of drug called a peptide drug, and what's new about this peptide drug, why should we use that? And obviously in the term we will talk about the ADMET profiling, that means what the classifications or criteria that a molecule must have to become a drug, and we're going to address and see the rules that are associated with this particular areas and all. Okay, so the first thing is that okay, so the first question is that what's a drug molecule? Now what do you think a drug molecule is? Come on, any answer. What do you think a drug molecule is? There is no right or wrong answer. Come on, anyone? So now see, the drug or the molecule is actually, drug is actually any molecule that can provide some therapeutic advantage to your body. That means any molecule that can cure your body. That means obviously if you are in a disease condition, it can take you out of that particular disease condition and make you healthy again. So any molecule that cater to this particular need can be qualified as a drugs. Okay, they can be called as a drug. And the process that is of how you develop this particular drugs is actually the drug design. Now the process is really a tough one, because not every disease happens due to a particular cause. There are multiple effects, there are multiple processes that are behind the particular disease, and so each disease is actually a new, it's a new class of disease. So obviously for that you can't use the other class of drugs that are already on the market. For that you have to develop new sort of disease, because that molecules are not enough to prevent that particular disease. So this process of developing that and understanding is the drug designing process. But before we go into detail into the drug designing, the first thing is that we have to answer the question that why do we fall ill? Now can any one of you say why do we fall ill? What do you think? Why do we fall ill? Sudipto, Shweta or Ajit, anyone, come on.
Sir, virus or bacteria attack.
Absolutely, very good. So virus and bacteria attack is going to make you fall ill. Yeah, absolutely right. And apart from that, any other theories?
Sir, weak WBC cells.
Yes, WBC cells. Yes, absolutely right. When our immune system fails. But obviously, why do they fail? The basic answer is why do they fail? Because of the proteins. And why protein? See, in our body, whatever we do because our brain tells us to do. For example, if you are hungry, because the brain actually signals that you are hungry. So if the brain signals that run, so you are going to start using your legs to run. It is going to ask you to eat, so you're going to take your hand and eat. So obviously everything that we do, it happens due to the action of that particular thing called brain. Now inside the cell also there are tiny brains, and those are the DNAs, the nucleic acid structures. Now those DNAs, they simply dictate and tell what to do, and as a result the proteins perform that function. So the DNAs are like the brain, whereas the proteins are like the hands and legs. They simply do what they are intended to do. But suppose what happens? Suppose you got a crack. Suppose you fell down and you broke your leg. Now in this particular case, even if the brain tells you that run, can you run? You won't be able to run. Why? Because if you start to run, then what happens? You are going to fall down, right? Because you have a leg broken, your leg can't hold your weight, so you are not going to do a job properly. And same thing happens for the proteins. Now whenever, suppose your body or the DNA has asked the cell to grow a little large, so as a result it is going to produce the growth factor receptors, and as a result the growth factors are going to bind to it and is going to grow. Okay, so now if the growth factor receptors that are actually expressed, what if they contain a mutation? What's going to happen? The growth factors won't be able to bind to it because they have that particular mutation, and as a result the cell is not going to grow. So anything that happens in your body, it generally happens due to the malfunction of a particular protein. Now this malfunction can actually be unfolded. It can be due to the unfolding of a protein, it can be due to a misfolding of a protein, or it can be due to a mutation in the protein. Okay, or it can generally due to these three causes the proteins actually misbehave, and this misbehave might lead to many things. It can lead to the protein aggregation, it can lead to production of ineffective or inactive proteins. So there are proteins but it's in inactive form, so obviously the inactive form is not going to work. So this kind of things actually happens due to this particular thing called mutation in the protein level, or and due to the epigenetics of that particular thing, right? Now, so that is why generally the drugs that we have, they are all protein targeting drugs. So the drugs, what they do, suppose you have an enzyme and that enzyme is not getting produced, there is an overexpression of that particular enzyme. Now obviously if there is an overexpression of the particular enzyme, you are going to perform a job but you are going to do it terrifically. For example, what happens, I have high TSH, I have hyperthyroid, so generally my body produces a lot of TSH, and as a result of that huge amount of TSH, my body metabolism is really high, and at certain point it became so high that I actually lost 28 kgs in just a single month. In a single month I lost 28 kgs because my metabolism rate got too high. Okay, so you can understand that's a very big thing, because obviously when the metabolism rate was, I was feeling good that yes, I am getting thin, out of doing nothing I am getting thin. But the thing is that it also starts to affect my nervous system, and my hand used to shake, and I was really tired the entire day because I don't have any energy, I don't have any muscle or fat, anything stored in me. So and that used to affected me, right? And that's why I started getting the drugs, and the drugs are actually the TSH inhibitors. They actually inhibit the TSH. So sometimes, so as my TSH got inhibited, my metabolism rate actually dropped low, and slowly I started getting my weight back, and I'm not perfect, and all the other symptoms actually tried to vanish away. So you see that due to the action of a particular drug, there are 3 or 4 or 5 different kind of symptoms that were occurring in me that actually got remedied, right? So that's what happens, that a small molecule that you design, it should bind to that particular protein. Now generally these are actually enzymes. So if there is an overexpression, you develop the inhibitors that can go and bind to that particular enzyme, or sometimes they can act as supplement. The ligand, suppose a particular protein is inactive, so your ligand is going to be a certain molecule that can activate your protein. So in this manner the particular ligand is acting as a supplement. Okay, so right now there are various mechanism of action for a particular drug, or different, every drug or every protein has a different mechanism of action. So you have to find that out and then develop a drug accordingly. But now the next challenge is obvious. So the first challenge is actually to find out a particular target, right? But the next challenge is that even though you develop a particular molecule that can bind to your protein, when you ingest that particular drug or the ligand reaches your cell, there are thousands of different proteins. There are thousands of different proteins. So what gives you the assurance that the ligand is going to go and bind to that particular selectively to protein A only. It is not going to bind to protein B or C. What gives you that confidence? And how does a ligand or any drug actually finds their way to go and bind to a particular molecule perfectly, or to the designed molecule, the designated molecule? Now generally you know what happens, that the molecules that you have, there are some designated molecules, right? So some molecules are there that can actually come and bind to a specific molecule or a specific target, but sometimes they also misses the target and they simply bind to protein B and C, and that's what gives rise to the toxic effect of a molecule. That's why you get the side effects. For a particular drug, there are sometimes different side effects. The side effects are due to the fact that your molecule is not highly specific to your molecule, to your protein. It is going and binding to some other protein. So if it is inhibiting some protein B or C, then obviously there can be some problem in your body, because protein B or C, they all have some particular job to do in your body, and they are in a threshold amount. So if I inhibit them, then my body's need is not met. It is not made. So obviously, if you don't meet up the body's need, then the body is going to throw up tantrums, right? And those tantrums results as they are actually manifested in the form of this particular diseases. So how does a ligand find its way to bind to a particular protein target specifically? It generally happens due to the shape complementarity method. That means whenever you design a ligand, you have to design a ligand complementary to the structure of that particular protein. Now there might be thousands of protein in our body, but each proteins have a different structure. They have a distinct topology that is not similar to any other proteins. Yes, there are homologous proteins present in our body, and in that particular cases there are sometimes going to be similarly shaped, but what happens, they are not going to bind to that particular, they have some unique regions with which that particular ligand can bind to. So you have to find out that unique distinct topology of that particular protein where you want your ligand to bind to, and to develop a ligand just exactly complementary to that particular structure. It is simply like a jigsaw puzzle. So if only two set matches, they are going to bind to one another. So there might be different number of different sets, but if they are not going to bind to or link up to any other molecules apart from the particular part with which it was meant to bind to, right? So that's why this shape complementarity thing and the charge matters the most. For example, suppose if you want your ligand to bind to a particular protein, and that particular protein has a higher density of arginine, lysine or histidine like amino acids. So obviously if that particular ligand binding domain is rich in arginine, lysine, that means it has a positively charged atmosphere there. So obviously if you want any ligand to bind to that positively charged atmosphere, you want your ligand to be negatively charged, because the opposite charge attract each other. So if there is a electronegative density or zone in a particular protein, you have to make sure that your atom contains electropositive elements, so that they can attract each other, and the affinity of the particular ligand binding to a protein is high. But if you develop a ligand that also has positive charge, what's going to happen? They're going to repel one another, and it's not going to be a high affinity binding. So you have to usually find out the exact topology of that particular protein and the charge of that particular domain where the ligand wants to bind to, and that's how the ligand is going to bind to the particular domain uniquely and specifically. Okay. So one thing that we have to keep in mind is that a drug can never show toxicity in our body. Why? Because the drug is there, the toxin kill you, the drug saves you. Obviously the drug is not a toxin, so it should not show toxicity. But there are sometimes some problem, and the problem is that, as I've told you, that even though you develop a ligand that is going to bind to that particular protein or uniquely and specifically, every time that doesn't happen. Why? Because the ligand goes and binds to some other proteins, and it generally happens when you have a homologous protein in your body. For example, we all look different, right? Everyone, Sudipto, Ajit, Shweta, I, everyone, we all look different, right? But still, sometimes there are two persons who look exactly similar to each other, and they are twins, right? So twins exactly look like each other. So in fact, I have a set of twins in my locality, and really I am seeing them for the past 12 years, but still I am unable to distinguish them because I am unable to simply find out who is who because it's really confusing for me. But obviously, their parents and their brothers, sisters, they can actually they know that who is who, and they can simply distinguish between them because there are subtle differences. There are subtle differences. However, you twins, you might be highly similar twins, but there will be subtle differences like exposed in the form of a little bit short height, a taller height, skin color, a hair color, the hair texture. That might be different, and that gives you the idea that who is who. But for us, we are not seeing them exactly for 24 hours a day. It's really difficult for us. So there are certain differences that are found in the particular twins also, right? Similarly, there are certain proteins called homologous protein, and they also have certain differences, and that's why you know that there might be a homologous protein, but they might share 80% or at least 90% homology. No two proteins ever share 100% homology. Why? Because if two proteins share 100% homology, that's the same protein. It's not a different protein. That's the same protein. Exactly same sequence, same structure, the same protein. It's not a different protein. So no two protein can have 100% homology, but they can have 90% or 80% homology, right? So if that means that when they have 80% homology, then in that particular case, obviously, that means that they have 80% of the structure that is similar to one another, but at least there is now 10% domain or 20% domain that is unique to that particular protein. So in this particular case, you have to develop or design a molecule that can bind to that unique 10% region, so that it binds to that particular protein uniquely. Now quickly give me an example of two homologous protein in our body. Come on.
Sir, hexokinase and glucokinase.
Absolutely, very good. So right, see, hexokinase and glucokinase are homologous protein. They are homologous to one another, but they have certain differences. And what are the differences? The difference is that hexokinase has much higher affinity to glucose, and the kcat by km value of hexokinase is much more. So that's the only difference. And obviously they share homology, but there are certain differences, small differences. So obviously if you develop a molecule that is unable to distinguish two homologous protein, so what would have happened if we have used a ligand against hexokinase? So rather than binding to hexokinase, it is also going to go and bind to glucokinase, which we don't want, right? And that is the only thing that gives rise to this off-target effect. So generally any molecule can go and simply bind to that any other protein. Now this sometimes even if you are highly careful and develop a molecule that's highly specific to a particular protein, still there is a chance that it is going to go and bind to some other protein, and that is always that particular risk. And that's why there are some off-target effects that are associated with this particular molecules, and these off-target effects generally give rise to this toxic side effects, and sometimes these are so severe that it might also be sometimes fatal. Okay, so now in this particular case, what you have to do, we have to simply identify that unique region, and for that we have to perform sequence alignment, and that is going to give us the unique region for that particular protein, and then develop a particular ligand targeting that particular domain. Okay, now generally you know that though this is the case, there are certain other drawbacks of this particular molecule that are actually allowing people to simply go back or take a step away from this development of usual small molecules and focus on developing some novel other biopolymer based drugs, and generally we call them as biologics. Okay, so that's why people are shifting their focus and developing that particular thing. So what are the other effects of that particular molecule? What are the other, can anyone say any other drawback of other usual drugs or medicines that we take? Yes, actually your voice is too low to hear, to be heard. I think there is some problem with your microphone, because whenever you are switching on your microphone I can hear a beep sound, but not your sound. You can simply write down in the messages. You can simply write down in the message. Just be brief. Yes. Oh, wait a minute. Yes, you have to study the pharmacodynamic and the effect of the particular drug, but what are the other drawbacks that are actually allowing people to go back, or people are trying to go back from this particular segment? That's what we need to discuss. Okay. So see, the first thing that people doesn't like about this particular molecule is that one thing that I've already discussed, the off-target effect, that it is simply going and binding to the other protein. But you might say that no, I have developed a molecule that is highly specific to protein A. So why is it showing the off-target effect? It is because the molecule that you design, that's a really small molecule. Small molecules are really small. And what happens is that though they may not have shape complementary to that particular structure, they sometimes are so small that they can simply slip into the groove of some other proteins. Suppose there is a protein which have a very larger groove. Now small molecule, being really a small molecule, it can simply slip into that particular groove and interact with that particular molecule. And this thing actually occurs. So even though you develop a very highly specific molecule, it is really impossible for you to screen a molecule against all the proteins and find a molecule that is only going to bind to your protein only. It is really difficult to do. Why it is difficult? That's good that we're going to talk about what we discussed, the virtual screening part. Okay. So that generally gives us this particular off-target effect. And apart from it, generally the small molecules, they have a very narrow therapeutic window. Now when I say narrow therapeutic window, what do I mean? Okay, suppose you are taking a paracetamol. Okay, how long do you think it is able to keep off your fever? Suppose you have fever, you have taken a paracetamol. How long do you think that the fever is not going to come back?
So, 6 hours.
Yes, 5 to 6 hours, 4 to 6 hours, and depending upon the dose. Okay, but generally 4 to 6 hours the fever doesn't come back. But after 4 to 6 hours again the fever comes back. Now why is it coming back? I have already taken the molecule. I have already taken a drug. So why is the fever coming back? The drug is there in my system, right? So why is the fever coming back? Because after a certain time the molecules start to degrade. The molecule starts getting metabolized. So if you have a molecule and if that molecule gets metabolized too fast, then it is not going to show its effect. Because what happens whenever you take a drug, after a certain time the molecule or the drug starts to show its effect, and after a certain time and within that particular minute the molecule also starts getting metabolized. Okay, so at first we have lakhs of molecule. So if even 50% of the molecules get metabolized, it doesn't matter. But slowly as it goes on and on, there are now not enough molecule present to inactivate a particular or inhibit that particular enzyme. So suppose you have an enzyme. So that particular paracetamol is a inhibitor. So it is going and binds the particular enzyme. Now remember that binding is not such a binding that the molecules keep on interacting with a particular protein. No, the molecule keeps on interacting with a particular protein, but after a certain time it might also get released from there. Again, another set of molecules is going to go and bind to that particular protein, and this time happens. That's how it occurs. But after slowly, if the molecule starts getting metabolized, So now there is not enough molecule available to inhibit your proteins, and as a result the fever again starts to come. So you might say that why not we develop a molecule that is going to, so that the interaction is so specific that it is going to go on bonded, it's going to keep on bonded to that particular protein for indefinite time, right? So we might develop a molecule like that. But why are we not developing a molecule like that? Because we don't want the protein to be inhibited for indefinite time. Why? Suppose, for example, the VEGF protein, the VEGF, what it does, it takes part in angiogenesis, and that means formation of new blood vessel, and it's a key regulator in cancer. So whenever the VEGF, have I told you about this VEGF story? How does the VEGF protein works or causes cancer? Yes or no? Shweta, type your answer.
No, sir, you
No.
haven't told yet.
Okay, fantastic. So you see that generally you know what happens. The VEGF is one of a protein that helps in angiogenesis. Now angiogenesis means formation of new blood vessels. So whenever there are, so why is it required? Because every day our cells die. So blood vessels also die. So obviously VEGF should be there to form new blood vessels. And obviously each day we also grow. And while we grow, new cells are divided and formed. So that particular cell needs to be replenished with nutrients. And the blood vessels are the source of nutrients, right? That actually brings the blood, and along with the blood there are nutrients that are coming, and these are the nutrients that we absorb from the food, right? So that are coming with that. Now whenever a particular set of, suppose sometimes what happens, a particular set of cells, they actually gets damaged, and there are a number of different ways to get damaged, but the ultimate result is that they have an overexpression of this particular VEGF protein. So obviously, as I have told you, that VEGF protein controls the angiogenesis procedure, that means formation of new blood vessel. So if there is more number of VEGF protein, there will be vigorous growth, because more, not vigorous growth means vigorous growth of blood vessels. More VEGF means more blood vessels. So in a particular set of cells there will be lot of blood vessel, and all are actually feeding that particular cell of the valid or important nutrients. Now generally what happens when we eat a lot? If we start eating a lot of food, what is the basic first thing that is going to happen to us? We are going to get fat, right? If I start eating rice and oily foods like chow mein, fried rice, biryani every day, I'm going to get fat, right? Same thing happens to the cells also. The cells which have a lot of blood vessel, they are getting a lot of blood, that means they are getting a lot of nutrients, and nutrients are food for the cells. So they are going to grow, and they are going to grow vigorously, and as a result slowly what happens, that cell in this particular domain, they all start getting fattened up, they start to divide, and slowly that particular area forms a tumor, and that's what the tumors are, vigorous growth of a particular set of cells. So that is going to give rise to a tumor. So one of the way to stop cancer is to develop a molecule that can go and bind to VEGF proteins. So if you develop a VEGF inhibitor, so what's going to happen? You have developed an inhibitor called against VEGF. The inhibitor is going to go there, it's going to bind to the VEGF protein in that particular cell, and it's going to stop or prevent the angiogenesis pathway. Now slowly the cells is starting to die, the blood vessels dry up and they die, but there are no VEGF for the formation of new blood vessels. So slowly the cells now are not getting enough nutrients to keep up their wholesome figure. And what happens if we go on diet, if we stop eating, if we stop eating a lot of oily food, what's going to happen? We're going to get thin down. We're going to get come out of that particular fatness, right? And slowly we're going to get lean and thin. And same thing happens to the cell also. The cells starts to get lean and thin, and as a result the tumor vanishes, and you simply kill the tumor cells. But suppose you have developed an inhibitor that is binding to VEGF protein for indefinite time. But now see, the VEGF actually needs to get stopped or inhibited only on that particular cells containing the tumor. In the rest of the body, the rest of the cells, or even the healthy cells surrounding that particular cancerous patch, they also have normal VEGF level, a threshold level of VEGF. So when we are taking an inhibitor, now generally the inhibitors sometimes they fail to distinguish between the cancer cell and the normal healthy cell, because cancer cells are human cells only, so there is a very little way of discriminating. There are ways of discriminating, but the VEGF ligands are not that able to do. So what happens, some of the cells or some of the ligand also goes and crops up into the healthy cells. So if they inhibit the VEGF of the healthy cell, the healthy cells are also going to start to die. And slowly what's going to happen, though your tumor is shrinking up, your normal healthy cells will start to die, because the healthy cells require the VEGF, normal level of VEGF for their optimal function, and you are preventing them from getting that information. So what's going to happen, they're going to start to die, they're going to die. And that is why the cancer cells sometimes they fail to kill. Even though they are able to kill the cancer cells, they simply destroy enough healthy cell for the person to survive. So even though the person survives, he or she might survive for 6 months or 1 month or 1 year more, but as the healthy cells are destroyed, that slowly that person also succumbs to death. Okay, so this is the narrow therapeutic window. So that is why even though you are taking suppose you are taking a drug, but after 4 to 6 hours again the particular fever is going to come back, but obviously you can't increase the therapeutic window. So right, so that is a big no. So that is why it inhibits or limits the particular growth. And obviously since if your fever again comes back, you again have to take a what's that called, a paracetamol, right? And you remember that there is a limit. The doctor advises that you might take a paracetamol whenever the fever comes back, but not more than 3 or not more than 3 tablets a day, or not more than 4 tablets a day. Why? Because if you take enough medicine, that also creates some problem in the body. And why does it create a problem? Because the molecule that you take up, they gets metabolized, right? But sometimes they gets metabolized to toxic metabolites like ROS and NOS. So what is ROS and NOS? ROS and NOS are reactive oxygen species and reactive nitrogen species. Sometimes the molecule gets metabolized and degrades to generate ROS and NOS. And ROS and NOS are highly mutagenic agent. They are able to mutate a particular protein or nucleic acid highly, and they are highly mutagenic, and that is why their creation sometimes creates a problem. And that is why people advises you to take up antioxidants. You get the idea, right? Eat antioxidants that are rich. This particular fruit is rich in antioxidants. So why the heck do we need to eat antioxidants? Due to this, the ROS and NOS generation, the antioxidants, they chelate the ROS and NOS, and they prevent the harmful effect of ROS and NOS. Okay, so that is generally the molecules or the fruits like strawberries, they are rich in antioxidants, and that is why nowadays you can find antioxidant anywhere, even on the face cream, even in the soap, even in the anything, everything comes wrapped in antioxidants. That's a marketing gimmick, but generally antioxidants are good for you. And strawberries and this cucumber, they are excellent source of antioxidants. Okay, and sometimes what happens that other than that, the metabolites are sometimes really toxic, and they don't get excreted out of the system properly, because at the end of the day you must have these metabolites get removed from your body, otherwise they get deposited into your liver and kidney. And when they start to get deposit into your kidney and liver. And suppose you think that you are taking a medicine. Now, how many medicine do we take in our lifetime? A lot. We take a lot of medicine, and all those are getting little by little, they are getting deposited into the body. So after it reaches but crosses a particular threshold, it is going to start show some problem. Now, in this respect, I must tell you about my friend. I actually had a friend. I used to study in hostel in my school days. Okay, so I had a friend there. So my friend's father was a doctor. So whatever, so he used to have a handful of medicines with him, and whatever used to happen is to take a medicine. Now in our hostel we had 32 football grounds, so it's like always we are playing, and whenever we are playing, either in rain or in storm, we used to get fever, we used to get some. We used to get into fight, so there were a lot of burns, injuries like that. But every time, generally we didn't care. But whatever happened to him, he used to take a medicine. So if even it's a slight tear, a medicine, a slight bump, a medicine. He got hit by someone, a medicine, a painkiller, or paracetamol like that. He used to take medicine. And so when class 8 or 9, he slowly started to get some stomach cramps. He used to get some stomach cramps. Okay, and slowly as he crossed that particular, as he aged and when we reached at our class 12 and 11, that became really frequent. So after that we went to college, and he got into a medical college, and at that time it was a really very tough thing that he was going through. So he consulted a doctor in his campus, and doctor advised a USG because they couldn't find any problem in his blood test. So he asked for USG, and while performing the USG, the technician was like, sir, where is the other kidney? And his father was right there, and he's like, what do you mean, where is the other kidney? The kidney must be inside, where it will go? And technician was like, no sir, there is no kidney. And later it was discovered that he only had one kidney by birth. By birth he actually had a single kidney. So, and the single kidney that he had, it was 75% of the kidney was actually filled up with the metabolites of the drugs that he used to take, and that is why it is hindering the purification of his blood. Now naturally, normally a particular person can live well with a single kidney, and but in his case he only had, so even if one of the kidney gets partially damaged, your body is able to maintain maintain your body functional with a single kidney. But in his case, he only had a single kidney, and that kidney was also damaged. So currently, right now, he can't take a medicine. Only like when he's in the verge of death, he can take a medicine. And he has flushed a lot of things out of the kidney, but he's also enlisted as an organ recipient. So whenever he gets a particular kidney matched to his blood group, he can access it. So you see, that's a problem, and that is why the excretion of this molecule, they create a lot of problem. And this deposition of these metabolites, they are so toxic in nature that they can even be fatal for you. Okay, so that is why this excretion of the molecule needs to be checked. It's a very important criteria to check. Okay. Now, apart from the particular thing, what happens is that the molecule that you have, the rest of the molecule that you have, that you need to synthesize, and obviously synthesis of the molecule takes a lot of time, effort, and also your health. Why? Because you have to use a lot of toxic fumes. You have to use a lot of toxic chemicals to develop your synthesized molecule. And those toxic chemicals and molecules and fumes, they sometimes multiply and cause terrible effect on your body in later part. So you know what happens is that sometimes if you have this kind of thing, they are really terrible. So they might give you after 10 or 20 years, those things can manifest. Okay, these effects can manifest. So that is why people are actually shying away from this particular small molecule development. And apart from that, one other important thing is that small molecules are not always fit for everyone, because see that chemically we all are different, right? So chemically because we physically we are all different, but our chemical balance is also different, because we have different set of hormonal concentration, we have different set of chemical balances in our body, and that is why a particular drug which is suitable for you might not be suitable for me, and that is why sometimes a particular drug becomes allergic to some other person. Okay, because that particular person might be allergic to a particular, suppose a particular person is allergic to magnesium, so if the disease or the drugs contain a magnesium, then it is going to, that particular person is going to, it is going to be toxic for that particular person, and sometimes it is really very difficult for us to know what you are allergic of, because in general we don't eat magnesium a lot, right? But in medicine the magnesiums are in high concentration, so it might be, so you might not know even before that you might be allergic to some drugs, and that sometimes might, and you know allergic reactions can be severe, it can give rise to a skin infection, and not only that, it sometimes is highly, it is really fatal also. So that's why, and the allergic, you must test that's why you see that even the COVID vaccines, sometimes there are some people, though it is rare, but sometimes people are actually allergic to this COVID virus vaccine. So for the people who are taking it, some people are getting skin rashes. So the rate is low, very low, but they are getting skin rashes and all. And so you see that not every drug is suitable for everyone. And currently you see a particular person, suppose we are at the a particular teens, when your body chemical balance, when you were teen, or your chemical balance of the body or the system when you were a small boy or small girl, and now when you grow up, you are at different age, your chemical balance and hormonal condition is going to be different, and right, and that might lead to and create some confusion in a particular drug. So that is why people are actually shying away from this particular drug and developing some other molecules that might give you better information, that might supplement with a much better variety. Okay. Now you see, so that's why people are now shifting their focus away to develop some, not to take the single molecule. They are trying to use your body's own setup, your own molecules to develop a drug. For example, they are taking protein, nucleic acid, and they are joining a small protein with small nucleic acid to develop some complex molecule. But the main thing is that since the molecules that they are developing or using as a drug, they are already present in our system, they are completely non-toxic in our case. And this toxicity is a very big issue in drug industry. Okay. So if you use a particular molecule which is for your own, made up from your own body, it is obviously going to be non-toxic in your body, right? So that's the usual notion. So that is why people are shifting the focus and developing the peptide drug molecule. Now in this particular aspect, what is a peptide? What's a peptide molecule? What's a peptide? Yes. Ajit, I can't hear anything. You can type in the message also. Just type in the inbox. Yes, right, Ajit, short chain of proteins. And yes, peptide bonds are actually when amino acid, two amino acids are connected by one another, they are connected by peptide bonds. But peptide is actually a short chain of protein. Okay. And what is the length of the protein? Generally, usually, a protein chain or a peptide amino acid sequence less than 50 amino acid, if the chain is less than 50 amino acid, usually call it as a peptide. Okay, but generally the peptide drugs are only 10 to 12 amino acid long, not more than 15. And in fact, there are some molecules which are also 23 mer or 24 or 25 mer molecule, but usually it is never more than 30. It is never more than 25 or 30. Okay, and usually people, the more smaller the molecule, the better the molecule is. Okay, so that's why people are trying to develop more smaller molecules, 8 mer, 9 mer molecules which can act as a drug. So that's the peptide molecule. So the first thing is that the peptides. Now you see that the chemicals, when you intend to synthesize these particular chemical molecules, you have to use toxic gases, right? But peptides are really easy to synthesis. They are really easy to synthesis. All you need is a peptide synthesizer, and all you have to do is set up that you have to set up the sequence of the peptide molecule, and automatically it's going to give you the entire protein, the peptide molecule in high concentration within 2 to 3 hours. So it's really easy job. I don't have to do anything, and anyone can actually do it. But organic synthesis requires a very important. You require a specific chemist who knows what to do, who knows how to do. But for peptide synthesis, all you need is a technician. You only have to take a particular person, show them, just click this switch, this switch, this switch, this switch, done. Peptide synthesis is occurring. He or she doesn't have to know the theory, the basic principle, nothing. All they have to do is follow up a particular procedure, and boom, there you have. All you have to do is click up something in the computer, and that's all. Right? So it is really easy to prepare. It's easy to purify. And the important thing is that the small ligands, the small molecules, whenever you take a drug, the drug actually has to reach inside your cell, right? But small molecules are not always specific to your cell. They don't always simply they can't penetrate that particular cell membrane. So as a result, sometimes you have to use some vehicle to transport your molecule. You have to use some vehicle that is attached to your drug molecule. The vehicle is can easily pass through the cell membrane. So obviously the vehicle, as it is passing through the cell membrane, and as the drug is attached to a particular molecule, it also gains entry into the cell. So you have to attach some extra additional thing with a particular drug, right, for your cell membrane permeability. But peptides, is their part of protein. If you develop a amphipathic peptide, and there are some cell-penetrating peptide motifs available. So if you can include one of the cell-penetrating peptide motif into your peptide drug, it can easily penetrate through your system automatically and naturally. You don't have to use any other associated vehicle, because anything that you attach, it might have some toxic effect in your body. So why should we take the risk, right? And the peptide also offer excellent tumor penetration property. Okay, and that is why people are actually focusing more on the development of this peptide molecule as a drug. Okay. Now the next thing is that the peptide, the ligand, the drug, what happens is that whenever you take a drug, generally the heart patient, they simply can't take any drug. Why? Because there are drug-drug interactions. And that is why the people who are with some heart ailments or who take some prescribed heart medicine, they always have to consult a doctor to know that if I can take this drug or not, because the doctor knows it well, that the molecule or the drug that you're taking, it might interact with drug A, B, C, D. So if you're not taking the drug of those things, that you are safe. And recently, that in one of my friends, not a direct friend, it's a friend of my friend, his father was actually a heart patient, and earlier whatever he used to do, that he used to always go to the doctor and ask, whenever he used to take a medicine, even it's a lame paracetamol, he used to ask the doctor before that if I can take that drug, and if the doctor says that yes, you can take, he used to take that drug. But during this lockdown, he was unable to go to a particular doctor, and he took a simple drug. I forgot the name of the drug, but it's a really easy drug. It's called painkiller, just a general painkiller. Okay, not blood-brain barrier crossing painkiller, just a general painkiller. But somehow it interacted with a particular heart medicine, and he was dead within 30 minutes. So you see this drug-drug interaction, they are really they are terrific, and that's why people who take kidney medicine, who undergo dialysis, or they take kidney medicine, or they take chemotherapy, or person who takes heart medicine, they have to be extra sure so that there is no drug-drug interaction. So in case of protein, you will find that it has very low drug-drug interaction because it is not going to be a dimer, because it is not going to be a self-associated peptide, because the peptide, it has a unique structure of its own. It's not going to bind to its own structure. So because the peptide that you're developing, it's a monomeric unit, it's not a dimeric unit, so there's not going to be a drug-drug interaction. And moreover, the peptide is not going to bind to other drugs, it is going to bind to your associated or the exact protein molecule, not to any other drug molecule, right? So it has no association with a particular drug ligand molecule, and it is itself is a really small, so that it can't bind to a ligand molecule. That's why people are going for this particular thing. So now that I have mentioned it, that the peptide binds to the particular protein molecule, now the very important notion comes is that, can a peptide bind to a protein molecule with high affinity? Okay, so that's what I'm going to discuss now. So now the thing is that, yes, we know the one of the most strongest interaction that we have in our biological system is the protein-protein interaction. Whenever you have a particular protein molecule, when it attaches to a different protein molecule, suppose you have a protein molecule A, which is binding to a protein molecule B, and that's its function. Now this protein A-B molecule interaction is highly specific, and it is of very high affinity. It's a very high affinity interaction, and there are very few forces that can break up this protein-protein interaction. Now peptide, being a part of the protein, it also shows highly specific and important interaction, because the small molecules are really small, that can simply slip out into any group and they are only having 1 and 2 interaction. But the peptides are larger than small molecule, and they have a lot of different binding sites. So ligand might have 2 binding site or 3 binding site or 4 binding site at most, but the peptide is having more. It is having at least 15 or 20 or 25 binding sites, and that makes a peptide highly specific for a particular protein. And that's why the protein peptide interaction is one of the most strongest interaction, or the most high affinity interaction and highly specific interaction. Okay, is it clear till this point? Okay, fantastic. Okay, so now I'm going to move to the next topic. For that, but before I move into the next topic, take a 5-minute break. Okay, take a 5-minute break, and then we'll be back again. So after 5 minutes. Okay. Okay, hi. Okay. So now you see that we have discussed that how the peptide actually can bind to a particular protein uniquely. But apart from it, it also offers one other unique strategy. That is that. But before describing that, you must know that generally proteins, they have multiple binding site in a particular yes, yeah. So the protein, they generally have multiple conformations. Okay, so a particular protein might have conformation. It might shuffle between conformation A, B, C, D. Okay, and that particular conformation changes according to the cellular condition. Or not even that. Suppose if a particular protein is in pH 7, it is going to have a different conformation. When the particular protein is again at a pH of 8, it's going to have a different conformation, and when it is at pH 2 at the stomach, it's going to have a different conformation. And apart from that, even if the protein is going to be present in a particular pH at a particular cell, it might attain a different conformation depending upon the chemical environment. If there is a higher amount of chloride ions in the particular more density of chloride ions or potassium ions, that also leads to the protein structure shuffling. So this particular thing, so what happens is generally whenever you design a ligand against a particular protein, generally you develop a molecule that is able to do, using the X-ray crystallographic structure, we develop a particular ligand that is specific to a particular molecule. Now the X-ray structures, they are highly specific. They simply crystallize a particular protein in a unique conformation. So suppose you have developed a molecule against which can simply go and bind to conformation A of the particular protein. But really, literally in body, the protein generally spends only a little amount of time in conformation A, and it spends a majority of time in conformation B, C, D. So in that respect, when the ligand is that is specific for conformation A of protein, so when the protein changes the conformation to B and C, what happens is that the protein or the ligand fails to maintain a high affinity bonding to that particular conformation. Now yes, when the protein changes the conformation, it is not like the protein changes the conformation entirely. It's really a different structure. No, there are really minute modifications, but that are enough for a ligand to not bind to that particular domain. Understand? But in peptide, since they are also a part of protein, they can also change their conformation. So if you have a protein, if the protein changes its conformation to a different conformation B, the peptide also edits and modifies its structure so that it can maintain the same high affinity binding to that same particular domain. Okay, that is why the peptide offers a much diverse structure, because the peptide structure can change. It has a dynamic topology. So as soon as the protein structure changes, the peptide also changes its structure accordingly. So it's a complementary structure changing, and that makes sure that the peptide is binding to a particular protein. Okay, and that affects in generating a very low off target effect. So that's why the peptide generally binds to its target protein. It doesn't go and bind to some other proteins. And the most important thing is that do you know the most important thing? The most important thing is that peptides are made up of amino acids. And so when they are getting degraded inside our cell, they are getting degraded into naturally occurring amino acids in our body. And obviously the amino acid means that is the protein rich thing that our cell can simply use in translation. So it is neither a toxic molecule nor the body is getting any harm from the peptide degradation. Rather, the body is actually able to utilize the non-toxic amino acid metabolites in the translation part. So it is actually acting as a supplement to the protein. It's actually acting as a protein supplement, and that's the beauty of this peptide trap. That is why people are actually shifting all their focus in developing the peptide trap rather than developing a small molecules. but still small molecules still today hold down the business, and wherever you go, small molecules are there. And though these are the non-conventional methods that are not still well adapted to our in our particular condition, because there are also some other cons to this peptide drugs. It's not like the peptide is the ultimate thing. No, there are several cons of the peptide drug. The first point or the drawback of the peptide molecule is that the molecule is susceptible to low pH. So if you are taking the molecule through as a tablet, through as a oral tablet, there are several proteases in your mouth that are ready to chop down or degrade the peptide drug. Even inside the cell you have proteases, you have proteolytic enzymes that can simply degrade and chop off the particular peptide. After that, if you take it as an oral pill, it's going to go and move into the stomach, and the stomach has a really low pH. So as a result, what's going to happen? It's going to unfold the protipeptide, and obviously if the peptide unfolds, it's going to lose all its activity, because you know the structure activity relationship, right? If you have a similar structure, you're going to maintain similar activity. If you have a different structure, you are not going to have similar activity. So that's the structure activity relationship. Similar structure, similar activity. So if you lose your structure, you lose your activity. Okay. But yes, there are other ways. There are ways to neglect these things too. For example, one thing that you can do is you can simply use peptide as an injection source. In that particular case, you are avoiding the low pH of stomach. And next thing is that even if you take it as an oral pill, you can staple the peptide. There are certain documents for like stapling peptide. In that particular case, you make sure that the peptide structure is, you staple the peptide structure so that the structure is never altered. So when in the low pH, the structure is maintained, and if the structure is maintained, it is going to show its effect, right? So there are ways against, but obviously there are pros and there are cons, and people are still in the verge of that. So this thing has really taken up the market, but it's going to bloom up in next 5 to 6 years. This particular thing is going to bloom up, the peptide drug. So that is how talked about the drug molecule and all. So now we're going to talk about that. What is the drug designing protocol made up of? What is drug designing protocol? So there are two methods of drug designing. One is SBDD, another is LBDD. Now can anyone say the full form of SBDD and LBDD? Yes. Ajit, I can't hear you. Can you type in? I can see that you have unmuted, but I can't hear anything. Nothing. Okay. No answer. SBDD means structure-based drug designing. See, I have already written structure-based drug designing. That is SBDD, and this is ligand-based drug design. Okay. So this is a general method of drug designing protocol. Okay. So let's talk about the SBDD first, the structure-based drug designing. Now this generally the protein structure is done by, there are different methods, right? NMR spectroscopy, you have X-ray crystallography, or you have cryo-EM structure, and the cryo-EM, right, electron microscope, that actually give rise to this particular protein structure. But sometimes that is not enough, and there are a lot of, I've already discussed the things that are associated with the drawbacks of this particular thing. So that's why we have to model a protein. So we have already modeled a protein, so we know how to perform the homology modeling. So by developing doing that, you might have the structure of the protein. So the main thing is that for SBDD, as the name suggests, structure based drug designing, you have to have a structure of a protein available. Okay, so you have a structure of the protein. So now we are going to scan the entire topology of that particular protein. We are going to scan the entire surface of the protein, find out the unique regions where the ligand might bind to. For sometimes you might, if it's an enzyme, you know that the inhibitor is going to bind to the active site. So the active or ligand binding site is already known. But in other cases, sometimes it's a novel protein. So for that, the ligand binding site is not known. And in that particular case, you have to scan up and see what are the different ligand binding domains there are. Okay. And we have to develop a ligand accordingly, according to the particular unique structure of the protein, according to the unique chemical structure or the perfect topology of the particular protein. You have to develop a molecule, and you have to then use the docking based virtual screen to see which molecule is going to. Now there are two ways of doing it. One way of structure based drug designing is to use already established molecule to see which molecule is binding to your protein. That means you have the protein structure. Now there are several databases of ligands available. Now you might say, what is the database? So let's simply first check one of the database. So this is one of the database of ligand. Okay, drug bank. Like this, there are several databases. So what is this database? This drug bank is actually the database of all kind of drugs that are available in this particular world. Any drugs that are manufactured and that are marketed, its list is present here. So any drug that are present in the market, you are going to you can find that molecule here. Suppose simply type in something. Suppose we want to type Tylenol. So what is Tylenol? Tylenol is actually the paracetamol. Okay. So you can simply type in the particular thing. So the paracetamol or Tylenol is also known as acetaminophen. Okay. So first you're going to get the summary of what is this. So acetaminophen is an analgesic drug used alone or in combination with opioid for pain management and as an antipyretic agent. And what is antipyretic agent? The molecule which can reduce the fever. It is known as antipyretic agent. Okay, that is known as antipyretic agent. So that is one of the things that we have, antipyretic agent. Now, what are the brand names? So see that particular thing, the acetaminophen or the paracetamol, it comes under various brand names like Children's Silapap, Contact, Cold and Flu, Non-Drowsy Maximum Strength, Corticosteroid, HBD, Cold and Flu, and different brand names. All these brand names, they are similar. They all are over-the-counter drug and they are all similar molecules. They all contain this particular acetaminophen. Next, you're going to get the generic name, the background, why it is really important, and you know that currently who uses it. See who actually use this particular thing, the type of small molecule. This is the structure of the molecule, right? You see all the information right there. And after that you get the indication. That means why should a particular person take the acetaminophen? Why does one takes it? So this is the causing, the why does one should take it, and the associated conditions in which the particular person takes the paracetamol. So we know that whenever we have a headache, if we have a strong body ache, we can take a paracetamol because it's a painkiller and an antipyretic agent. So it is used with acute when you have gouty arthritis, febrile convulsion, joint dislocation, muscle injury, mild pain, muscle inflammation. So for all this particular thing, rhinorrhea, sinusitis, soreness. So for all these things, this particular drug is actually used. Okay. And next you get to see the pharmacodynamic. So what is pharmacodynamic? Now I'm going to discuss the pharmacodynamic later on. Okay. I'm going to discuss the pharmacodynamic later on because I'm going to discuss what is that is later on. Okay. Next you get to see the mechanism of action. So what is mechanism of action? The mechanism of action is how does this particular molecule binds to it. Now you see there are many molecules. So this generally till now people doesn't know how paracetamol works. There are several theories. One of the theories states that it can bind to either to COX-1 or to COX-2 protein. Now COX-1 and COX-2 proteins are two proteins which can generally associate with pains and fevers. but nobody knows for sure. See, the exact mechanism of action of this drug is not fully understood at this time, but future research may contribute to a deeper knowledge. People still doesn't know how this molecule actually works. They can hypothesize that it binds to COX-1 and COX-2, but no one knows for sure. Okay, so but for the other drugs you might see the mechanism of action, and yes, this kind of drugs are available for which you don't know the mechanism of action. Why? Because the end result is that the molecule that you are taking should not be toxic in your body, and it should reduce your symptom. And earlier also used to take molecules like that. So if that particular molecule is able to reduce your symptom and it's non-toxic, you can use that as a drug. You don't need to know the mechanism of action. You also only need to see that yes, this is highly specific, this is not showing any toxic effect in your body, so good, you can use this as a drug. Okay, and next you can see the absorption, the volume. This is the pharmacokinetic dynamics. Next you see the metabolism, how this molecule gets metabolized. So it is first getting metabolized to NAPQ1, then to acetaminophen cysteine, then to acetaminophen glucurinoid, sulfate, all these things. Now see high doses of acetaminophen overdose can lead to hepatic necrosis due to depletion of glutathione and of binding high level of reactive metabolite. This is the metabolite. See, NAPQ1 to important part of liver cell. The NAPQ1 simply binds to important part of liver cell. So it is not really good to take paracetamol even at high dose, and that is why doctor advises that at a particular day you can't take more than 2, 3 or 4 tablets depending upon the dose. Okay, because even though a molecule doesn't have a toxic side effect, if taken at high concentration, that they can damage your liver, and that is why you see that above mentioned damage to liver can be prevented by early administration of sulfur hydride compounds. Why? Like methionine and N-acetylcysteine, because they simply chelate the NAPQ1. They simply go and bind to NAPQ1 and prevent its activity, right? So that is why these really are important. That's why you should not self-medicate. You should always ask doctors what to do, because they might not know the basic principle behind a particular action, but they know which drugs are used for and what purpose. They know that to give methionine in case of overdose of a particular, they don't know why it is given, but they know it should be given. That's why always ask to consult the doctors for that. Next you have the route of elimination, how that particular molecule is getting excreted out. So see, it is excreted, less than 5% is excreted in the urine as free form, and the rest of the thing, and there are various way of excretion. Okay, so these are the things that you can get to see, the half-life, the clearance. See, the half-life for adult is 4 to 2.5 hours, and that is why after 5 hours you get to see that there is the fever is again coming back, because after only for 2.5 hours 50% of the population of the particular molecule gets metabolized. But if we have heavy dose, in overdose, half-life can range from 4 to 8 hours. That means you are not going to get any fever for 8 hours for 100, because fever is not going to come back until there is 100% depletion, right? So that is the thing, the toxicity, mutagenesis. So all of these things can actually be seen and be administered by this particular criteria. So see, next you have the toxicity. So how does it affect the body? So is there an overdose and liver toxicity? What is the thing that you have to do? For carcinogenesis, does it have any property in carcinogenesis if taken for long time? Does it give rise to any carcinogenesis? See, the clinical relevance of this finding in human is unknown. People have still been yet to know that generally there is no evidence of carcinogenesis in male rats. So generally if you give this particular molecule, take a molecule, then it is not going to give rise to cancer in your body. But is it mutagenic? Is it able to mutate your DNA structures? So this is the mutagenic study. Can it do? So see, it is not, because the clinical relevance of the finding is unknown. People either have not studied or they have found that it is not causing mutation in the DNA if taken at high concentration. Okay, but can it inhibit the fertility? So these are the various things that you have to see. The most important is obviously the pregnancy, because in case of pregnancy there is not a lot of drug that you can take, and you have to be highly selective so that the drug does not cause any damage to the fetus present inside the mother's womb, right? So that is why. So is this molecule really tough for the pregnancy? So see, FDA level for acetaminophen considers a pregnancy category C drug, meaning that this drug has demonstrated adverse effect in animal studies. But there are no human clinical studies in pregnancy have been done to this date for intravenous purpose. So obviously it might have some effect. So it's not better. So for a pregnant woman, it's not good to take acetaminophen, and your doctor can prescribe the alternative drugs. Okay. So next you get to see the drug-drug interaction. So with which molecule, right? We're talking about the drug interaction, right? There is drug-drug interaction. So with which molecule is this particular drug is interacting? It is interacting with abacavir, abametapir. So these are the various drugs with which it can actually bind. Now sometimes the binding is not always for a negative sense. The interaction sometimes also push up or give some extra boost to a particular drug. Okay, so the drug-drug interaction is always there is a good alternative. It has a good impact and a bad impact. So it's not that always you have a bad impact for a drug-drug interaction. So these are the drugs with which it can actually interact. Okay, so to know about the rest, you can simply change the page number to know about all of the things. So like that, if you simply go down, you get to see the brand name prescription products. Who prescribes it? It's 70 grams a tablet, acetaminophen injection, and it is present where, when is the marketing date going to end. So these are the different things that are going to come down. The generic prescription product which is used all over the world, who produces this, like the over-the-counter products are made by the mark of, there is a Whole Food Market, the 7-Eleven. These are things where you can find out this particular molecule. Okay, and next you get to see the, if you come down, you get to see the unapproved products. That means this particular molecule has been edited, but is all the, because people always try to modify the drug so that it can show better activity, right? It can show better activity with lower toxicity. So that's why they try to develop and edit the structure. So are all the editing good? No. Some of the products are unapproved. For example, acetaminophen. So in this particular case, benzalkonium chloride or this kind of things are actually unapproved. People have not approved that yet. Whereas there are some mixture products that are used. For example, acetaminophen, caffeine and codeine phosphate. Why? Because there is extra strength. If you have high fever, if you have, suppose you are using codeine and acetaminophen. So if you have terrible pain, so codeine is a really painkiller. So if you have terrific pain, if your bone got broken, so you will do a lot of pain. So if you are in lot of pain, you can use this particular extra strength drug. Obviously, because as it contains codeine phosphate, is going to, along with acetaminophen, is going to numb up the entire pain receptors on your body, providing you the benefit. So these are the things that you can simply check down. Okay, so like this, these are the one of the database. So in case of protein, we saw that there is a UniProt database, there is RCZ PDB database that we have to visit and find out the information for the molecule. So this is one of the database that can actually give you the information of all the molecules that are currently in the market. Okay, this is the drug bank. But obviously, in this particular case, you are not going to find the information of the molecules that are not drug. There are also other databases that are there. I'm going to talk about those databases later. So there are some databases like zinc, which contains all the chemical molecule that have been synthesized till date, whether it is unapproved or for which all the paper have been published. All these information are stored in the zinc molecule or in the zinc database. So people uses that databases for virtual screening. So why I was talking about this particular thing? Because see, in case of the virtual screen, talking with virtual screen, what we do, suppose we have this particular molecule. Okay, so suppose we have found out the COVID spike protein. So now we have to find a medicine that can prevent or inhibit the COVID spike protein. So what you are going to do, we're going to take that protein and we're going to use the drug bank application to drop all the molecules, available drugs that are present there. We're going to perform the virtual screening. All the molecules, they're going to bombard that particular protein with all the small molecules. And the molecules are going to go and bind to it. Now among them, only a selective few molecules is going to bind to it, not all. So if I bombard that particular protein with 1 lakh molecule, 50,000 molecules or 70,000 molecules are not going to bind to that particular protein. So there are going to be, suppose 1,000 molecules are binding to a protein. Now there are, even if it is binding, there are different categories of binding. Strong binding, weak interaction, medium affinity. So we're only going to put up a particular molecule which pass a particular threshold. So we're going to only select 5 or 10 best highly selective molecules that are binding with high affinity. Now among that particular molecule, we have to take those 5 to 10 molecules and see whether they are able to inhibit that particular protein or not. Among that 10 molecules, we found out that 5 molecules are binding to it, but they are unable to inhibit the protein. Whereas we find out there is one molecule or two molecules which is showing inhibition of that particular protein. And among that two, one is showing higher inhibition rate. So we are going to select, when to perform the bioassays, when to select a particular lead molecule, the molecule which is able to induce inhibition to that particular protein. So that will be our lead molecule. So now we have to optimize our lead molecule to perform molecular dynamic simulation. So molecular dynamic simulation is going to give us the idea that how the ligand is binding or interacting with a particular protein. So suppose now I can find out the atomic nitty-gritty of their interaction. So once I find out their particular thing that they are interacting with this particular molecule, we can now see that yes, there is also another molecule. Suppose I have a ligand. The ligand is bound to this particular molecule, but there is another oxygen a little far away with which I feel the molecule can perform or form a hydrogen bond. So if I am able to form another hydrogen bond, that is going to increase the affinity more. So I am going to attach another small functional group there, that is our amide group, our NH2 group, so that NH2 group can form a hydrogen bond with that oxygen over there. So this is lead optimization. We have to edit the structure so that we get higher affinity, we get higher inhibition. So we have to optimize that particular lead molecule. That is lead optimization. And after we optimize the molecule, we are going to synthesize the molecule, and finally we are going to get that particular molecule and perform all the other bioassays with it, right? So that is the structure based drug designing. Is this particular part clear? Is structure based drug designing part clear?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So now there is another domain called LBDD. What is LBDD? LBDD is a ligand based drug design. So you see, in this particular case, in case of structure based drug designing, we actually require a structure of protein. But there is alternative method where you don't need to find the structure of protein. For example, see the paracetamol, the acetaminophen. People doesn't know with which the particular molecule is binding to, but still we are using it, right? So that gives rise to a domain called ligand based drug designing. Now suppose I want to develop another antipyretic agent. I want to develop another molecule that can reduce the fever. So where I will start? I will obviously start at the structure of acetaminophen, because I know that this structure can reduce fever. So that will be my basic structure. So now I have to perform the 3D QSAR. We have to analyze the entire topology of the ligand. We have to find out the important descriptors in the present in that particular ligand, and we are going to employ a similarity search, so that we are going to identify molecules that are similar to my molecule, that is similar to acetaminophen. So we are going to simply use another thing we are going to use a similarity based search to find out a ligand that has all the structural characteristics similar to acetaminophen. So now I have to edit the molecule to improve the descriptors. For example, suppose in acetaminophen, so what is the structure of this particular molecule? So see, this is the structure, right? This is the structure. So there is, as you can see, there is a hydroxyl group over here, there is a double bond over here. So I know that this hydroxyl group has a negative charge. Okay, so I know there should be a negative charge over this particular domain. So what I can do, I can attach another chloride ion or a fluorine atom over there, so that it might offer much more higher electronegativity, higher electron affinity, right? Now I have to see if that particular fluorine or providing a higher electronegativity domain can repress the fever mode or not. If I am able to see yes, by replacing this fluorine, I am able to replace the fever within 15 minutes. I am able to suppress the fever within 15 minutes, and again the fever is not coming back for next 7 to 8 hours. So I know that this molecule is a very good molecule. So this is the descriptor identification, and then you have to find and perform the scaffold hopping. Now obviously I can't use a bromide over here single. So I have to hop the scaffold and use a bromide, a fluorine, or another negative domains, or I have to simply improve or apply a completely different atom over there to find out whether it is binding to that particular or it is able to suppress the activity more. I am able to get more activity out of that particular structure or not. Okay, so that is a similarity based search. Okay, so that's what we do when we try to find out a ligand or to develop a ligand for which we don't want to have the structure of the molecule, because there are a lot of proteins, and you know ligand. So what do you think is the best method, SBDD or LBDD, or which is the earlier method? Which came first, LBDD or SBDD? Huh? SBDD, no. Ligand based LBDD is the earlier method, because see, earlier times people doesn't know what used to happen. But Ayurveda, take example about Ayurveda. People didn't know that why taking a tulsi can prevent cold and flu. They only know that taking a tulsi is going to prevent the cough and cold. They don't know how, right? So later on we found out there is some active ingredient called urosolic acid present in the basil leaf or in the tulsi leaf. So we have isolated that particular active ingredient called urosolic acid, and we are able to synthesize urosolic acid and using them as a capsule or a tablet. We don't know how urosolic acid is able to reduce the cough and cold, but we know that yes, urosolic acid or this particular structure can prevent cough and cold. So now we are using similar molecule like urosolic acid so that they have much higher effect on your body, or we make the concentration of that urosolic acid higher. So that is LBDD is actually the earlier method. So now people are shifting to SBDD because it is better to know the mechanism of action. It is better to know why the drug is acting the way it is acting, because it gives rise to less toxicity. Now generally you know that the molecules that you get from the nature, the natural products, they generally have no side effects. Natural products have zero side effects. So if you find a natural product, you can use that natural product anywhere. That's a very big boon, because natural products don't need to be tested for other effect, because they are neither carcinogenic nor they are mutagenic. They are perfect for human consumption, natural products. That is why people are trying to identify important ingredients from the molecule. For example, there are certain leaves that are able to reduce your blood pressure. So why it is able to reduce the blood pressure? You have to find out the active ingredient. They are trying to isolate the active ingredient and use that as a tablet, because for that you don't have to perform the toxicity studies, and toxicity studies take up a lot of time and lot of money. You have to perform the clinical trial as well. So overall that actually takes around 1,000 or 2,000 crores rupees to perform that particular thing. So if you avoid that, you are saving that huge kind of money, right? So that's why people are going for this particular LBDD. So after you get that particular LBDD, the molecule that you get, now we have to perform the ADMET prediction. What is ADMET prediction? ADMET prediction means absorptivity, distribution, metabolism, excretion and toxicity prediction. Because the molecule that you get, we obviously have to find out that if that particular molecule is absolutely a good molecule or not. Because if that particular molecule is not a good molecule, or if it doesn't have this particular features, if it is not non-toxic, you can't use that. If you see that, there are some ways to check that too. There are some ways. For example, see why it is important, because see in this particular case, see this is the absorption, how the molecule is getting absorbed. See, acetaminophen actually has 88% oral bioavailability. So that means and it can reach highest plasma concentration 90 minutes after ingestion. That means if you use acetaminophen it actually takes 90 minutes for it to get completely absorbed into your plasma. To get complete absorption, it takes what, 90 minutes. So that means 1.5 hours. Okay. So that means at that particular time you start getting the sweat because your fever is coming down. You start to sweat it out. You are feeling fairly hot. You are really feeling hot because that's the time where the concentration peaks. So this is the absorption. So if a particular molecule is there which is not showing enough oral bioavailability, it is not getting absorbed to the system, then you can't use it as a drug. Because if the molecule is not getting absorbed to the system, can you use it? You can't use it. So that is the absorption. Next, where is the molecule moving? That's the distribution. And using that, doing that, we we screen the admit prediction. And next, then before that, we have to perform the scaffold doping. That means, suppose you have this particular molecule, okay. So now you have to bombard that particular thing with a lot of different chemically similar molecule. So once the chemically similar molecules are bombarded, you try to find out that this particular case is actually binding to your molecule with high affinity, but it has a benzene ring. So now what you have to do is you have to change that particular scaffold. You have to add a cyclohexane instead of benzene to see if it is reducing its activity or not. And if you see it is reducing its activity, so you know that you need aromatic group over there. So now in place of one aromatic group, you intend to use two aromatic group, so that you find out that there is a structural, the structure is acting or the structure is providing a very good structure and it is able to reduce the fever more. So these are scaffold hopping. But sometimes you see that some molecules, suppose you have a molecule that is not at all water soluble, what is going to happen? You can't use a molecule which is not water soluble because 70% of your body is water. So if 70% of the body is water, obviously I have to use that particular, your molecule has to be water soluble, but sometimes the molecule is not water soluble. Okay, so you have to edit the structure to make sure it is water soluble. But while editing the structure, if I simply reduce it, I have to make sure that the activity doesn't reduce. Okay, the activity is not reducing. So this is another job. So you have to make sure that you are able to have all the best characteristics without compromising the activity. So you have to use a lot of different scaffold. So in one case you find out that now generally you know that having a nitrogen group enhances the water solubility. So obviously that means that you might incorporate a lot of nitrogen to increase the water solubility. But you can't incorporate nitrogen at anywhere, at any position. No, you can't do that. Because all the domains of that particular drug has some important interaction. They have some perfect thing to do. So suppose there is a particular domain. There is a carboxyl group over there. Now the carboxyl group can actually shuffle between CO minus and COH, right? And again the CO group also can participate in a hydrogen bond. So if you prefer and you feel that that particular structure is stabilized by the hydrogen bond of the carboxyl group, so rather than using a carboxyl group, you might use another group that is much more water soluble, like hydroxyl group. So apart from carboxyl, you might use a hydroxyl. I have to see whether it is improving the activity or not. So this is the scaffold doping. So now you have to perform this a lot and see whether the water solubility method is actually improving and it is not compromising the activity as well. All the other parameters of that particular molecule is at a particular location. It's actually fit to be used. And only then that particular ligand molecule is actually fit to be used, and you can use that molecule as a target to bind to that protein. Now obviously in ligand based drug designing, generally we don't have the idea about the target molecule, but obviously you might sometimes, it's not that always you follow the SBDD and only the LBD. No, sometimes we mix this up. How do we mix it up? Suppose you have found a particular molecule which can bind to this particular protein with a great affinity. So what you do, you have a protein structure, you bombard that with that particular molecule, and you found out a particular molecule that is having by affinity or binding to a particular protein. Now you can use that particular molecule or motif as the basic structure for LBDD and try to find out similar molecules that have similar structural characteristics of that particular molecule. So now you take those molecules that have similar characteristics and you perform the SBDD method, and you see whether that particular new molecule that you received, whether it is having much more shape complementarity method to your protein or not, whether it is showing higher affinity to your protein or not. So it is not that only people go for SBDD and only people go for LBDD. No, people have sometimes also mixes this up. But generally in pharmaceutical industry, people, they go for the LBDD method. They rarely use the SBDD. Obviously, because the SBDD requires a lot of money. You have to hire an expert structural biologist. You have to hire an expert molecular biologist to perform all the assays and all. But for LBDD, all you need is a chemist. All you need is a chemist who can identify each chemical descriptor and they can perform the job. So that's a very easier method to do, and that's why the pharmaceutical industry, they have LBDD method as the standard method. But they also have another significant R&D domain where they prefer to use or try to find out novel molecules, because everything is about the patent. If you develop a novel molecule and if you bear the patent, then for 15 years you are the sole manufacturer of the particular ligand, and if it's a very good drug, you are going to earn in crores and crores and crores, and the pharmaceutical industry only cares about the money, nothing else. Is it clear? Okay, so we are stopping here today, and in the next class we're going to see how to design a molecule and how to find out this ADMET profile, how to profile this ADMET screening, how to find out what the different criteria and what are the other criteria of the drug likeness parameters, the ADMET profiling, what is pharmacokinetic, what is pharmacodynamic. That thing we're going to discuss in the next class. And for the next class, please install this application in your computer, okay, the ChemSketch. So this is the ChemSketch application. This is a free software that you can simply download and install in your computer. So kindly install this. I'm sending you the link, and here you can find out the freeware version. Okay, the freeware version is enough. So I'm sending you the link, so kindly make sure you have that. Okay, and install it in your computer. Clear? Okay, so if you have no more question, then we are stopping here today. So